The torrential rain pounded against the enormous windows of my mansion, creating a symphony of drops that seemed to sing the melody of loneliness. It was a night like any other, where the echoes of my own thoughts were my only companions. As I prepared for the charity event I had organized, I glanced outside and saw lightning illuminating the dark sky. It was as if the universe wanted to draw my attention to something beyond my life filled with luxury and superficialities. The mansion, with its elegant furniture and paintings by renowned artists, reflected my success. Yet it was also a labyrinth of solitude. Although I was surrounded by successful and influential people, the truth was that I never felt truly connected to anyone. That night's event promised to be just another occasion where smiles were exchanged and empty promises were made. Amanda, the millionaire, was how many saw me, but few knew the real woman behind the facade. As I got dressed in a long black gown that accentuated my curves, I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever find a real purpose for my life. The lightning continued to flash across the sky, and the storm seemed to intensify. With a sigh, I grabbed my purse and decided I needed some fresh air before receiving the guests. When I opened the door, a cold, damp wind rushed into the house, almost as if nature wanted to warn me about something. I walked towards the car parked in the garage, and while searching for something in the glove compartment, I heard a sound that made me stop. It was crying. A child's cry. The sound was faint but piercing, and it seemed to come from somewhere nearby. My heart raced. What were two children doing in this storm? The instinct to protect awakened within me, and without thinking twice, I followed the sound. The rain poured in torrents, and visibility was nearly obscured. I moved quickly, following the cry that grew louder with each step. Turning a corner, I saw two small, soaked silhouettes, shivering with cold and fear. A boy and a girl, likely siblings, stood there, lost and alone. Their eyes were filled with desperation, and my heart broke at the sight of them. "Hey, are you okay?" I tried to speak in a warm tone, but my voice quivered with the intensity of the situation. "Come on, you need to warm up." They hesitated for a moment, but the need for protection seemed to outweigh their fear. The boy, with brown hair and big eyes, held the hand of the girl, who had blonde hair and a vulnerable expression that pierced my heart. Without thinking of the consequences, I did what anyone would do, I brought them into my home. As soon as we entered, the warm temperature of the mansion contrasted sharply with the chill of the storm outside. I led them to the living room and quickly grabbed towels to dry them off. They were so drenched that their clothes clung to their bodies. As I helped them dry off, I noticed how they looked at each other, as if they were protecting one another. There was no doubt they were inseparable. "What happened?" I asked, trying to be gentle. "Where are your parents?" The boy hesitated and glanced at his sister, who remained silent, staring at the floor. Their silence was deafening, and a sense of despair began to envelop me. I remembered how, in my childhood, there were times when I felt just as lonely and lost. A wave of empathy washed over me. "I'm Amanda," I said, trying to break the ice. "What can I do to help you?" After a few moments, the boy finally spoke, his voice trembling. "I'm Lucas, and this is Sophia. We got lost." There was a weight to his words, and I could feel that there was much more behind that simple phrase. What they were going through was something I could hardly imagine. As the warmth of the house enveloped them, an inexplicable connection began to form between us. It was as if, somehow, their souls cried out for recognition and understanding. As I watched them, memories of my own childhood flooded back, rainy days when I too felt alone and forgotten. Memories of distant laughter and playing in a park that now existed only in my mind. Something within me began to stir, a buried recollection that started to emerge, but I couldn't quite grasp what it was. The past intertwined with the present, and the presence of the children seemed to awaken something I had tried to forget. "Do you want something to eat?" I asked, trying to steer my thoughts away from the dark. The idea of feeding those children gave me a sense of purpose, something I had long lost. Lucas and Sophia nodded, and I led them to the kitchen. As I prepared some sandwiches and warmed up milk, I watched them whispering to each other, as if sharing secrets that only siblings could understand. The sound of their soft laughter was music to my ears, and I realized that, at that moment, I was doing something meaningful. I was caring for someone beyond myself. When the sandwiches were ready, I returned to the living room and saw them sitting on the couch, still a bit tense but more relaxed now. I served them, and as we ate, the conversation flowed naturally. Lucas and Sophia began to open up slowly, and I listened to their stories with a heavy heart. They spoke of a place they had left behind, of moments of fear and loneliness. Each word they spoke seemed to echo within me, as if they were unlocking an old door I had locked away. As we talked, the storm raged outside, but something magical was happening inside my house. The barriers I had built over the years began to crumble, and I realized that even amidst chaos, there was space for compassion and human connection. It was as if those two children had come to me not just to seek shelter, but to remind me of who I really was. That night, while the lightning still illuminated the sky and the rain continued to fall, I knew my life had changed forever. The bond one felt with Lucas and Sophia was undeniable, and I was determined to do whatever it took to protect and help them. The past, though dark, began to intertwine with the present in a way I could never have predicted. And so, that stormy night would become the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I believed about myself and the world around me. The silence in the room was almost deafening. The only sound I could hear was the rain pounding against the windows, as if the sky were lamenting along with me. Lucas and Sophia were sitting on the living room carpet, wrapped in warm towels I had brought from the bathroom. Despite the heat, their expressions, especially Lucas's, were filled with a mix of fear and distrust. I knew I had to learn more about them, but how could I do that without invading their privacy and forcing them to relive the traumas they clearly carried? "Do you have somewhere to go?" I asked, trying to break the ice. Sophia shook her head while Lucas shrank back a little more. The silence stretched on. I could see they hesitated to share their stories, and that worried me. "If you don't feel comfortable, that's okay. You don't have to talk right now. We're safe here, and you can stay as long as you need." After a few minutes that felt like hours, Lucas finally broke the silence. "We ran away from a bad place," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A place where we weren't happy." I looked at him, trying to grasp the pain in his eyes. I remembered how painful it was to be a child and have no one to protect you. Even though I wanted to hug him, I knew I had to be careful. "Can you tell me a little more about it?" I asked softly. "I promise I won't hurt you. I just want to help." He hesitated, his gaze drifting away. It was a dark place. The people there, they weren't good. Sophia moved closer to Lucas, holding his hand. "We just wanted to get out. We didn't want to stay there anymore," she added, her voice trembling. I recalled my own childhood, the dark nights when I also wished to escape a suffocating place. Memories surged like a wave, and I found myself in the shoes of that scared child who didn't know where to go. What would have happened if I had escaped with someone? Would I have found a shelter like the one I was offering them now? "Lucas, do you have parents?" I asked, even knowing this question could be painful. He lowered his head, a movement that sent a pang through my heart. "I don't know," he replied, his voice almost inaudible. "We haven't seen our parents in a long time." Sophia looked at me with a glimmer of hope. "Maybe you can help us find them," she asked, her eyes shining in contrast to the sadness I saw in Lucas. I felt an overwhelming urge to protect those children. I wanted them to know they weren't alone, that someone cared. But at the same time, a deep fear settled within me. What if I couldn't help them? That night, while the children slept in one of the guest rooms, I couldn't close my eyes. The storm was still raging outside, but it was the storm inside me that kept me awake. Lucas's look, filled with despair and uncertainty, replayed in my mind, and I knew I had to do something. I needed to find out more about those siblings and what had led them to wander alone on such a stormy night. The next day, while preparing breakfast, an idea began to form. What if I could find someone who could help me understand what was happening? I remembered Daniel, a childhood friend who had disappeared years ago. We were inseparable, sharing secrets and dreams, until one day, he simply vanished. The pain of that loss had never completely left me. Now, however, maybe his story could help me understand more about Lucas and Sophia's situation. After a quick breakfast, I called the children to join me in the living room. "Lucas, Sophia, do you know someone named Daniel?" I asked, trying to make the question sound casual. They exchanged glances, and Lucas replied, "No, we've never heard that name." But there was a hesitation in his voice. Something told me he knew more than he was willing to share. That answer left a bitter taste in my mouth. Why did I still hope for some connection? What had happened to Daniel? The memories of our friendship were intertwined with the pain of his disappearance, and now, looking at those siblings, the connection felt stronger than ever. I needed to know if there was any relation between what happened to Daniel and the situation of the siblings. After a day of uncertainty, I decided that at dawn, would begin my investigation. The first step would be to visit the school where Daniel had studied. What else could I find there? Maybe there were people who remembered him. And if I was lucky, I could uncover something about his parents or what might have happened to him. The next morning, the sky was overcast, but the storm had given a break. As I prepared, a feeling of anxiety grew within me. What was I going to discover? What if there was something I didn't want to know? But the need for answers outweighed the fear. I needed to understand. As I drove to the school, my thoughts unfolded like a movie in my mind. I remembered the last day I saw Daniel. He was so excited about his mother's birthday. I wondered if he ever got to celebrate it. If he had been taken from me, what would have happened to him? What would I have done if I were in his place? That was a question that wouldn't let me be at peace. Arriving at the school, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. The walls, the hallways, and even the smell of the place transported me back to my childhood. Upon entering, I found a receptionist, an elderly woman who seemed to know all the students by name. "Hello, dear. How can I help you?" she asked, with a warm smile. "Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm here to ask about a student who studied here many years ago." "His name is Daniel," I replied, trying to hide the emotion in my voice. The receptionist's expression changed. "Ah, Daniel, such a good boy. What would you like to know?" I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of memories. "I just want to understand what happened to him. He disappeared, and I never saw him again." She sighed, her expression turning somber. "It was a very sad situation. He disappeared on a summer day, and since then, we've never heard from him again." Her words resonated in my heart like an echo. The sadness in the woman's eyes reflected the pain I felt. What had happened? Why didn't he come back? What could I do to help him, even after all these years? The receptionist then handed me a piece of paper. "Here are some contacts of people who might know more about what happened to Daniel. I hope this helps." With the paper in hand, a new determination formed within me. I needed to follow this lead. I had to understand what had happened to Daniel, and perhaps in doing so, I could help Lucas and Sophia. And perhaps, in seeking the truth about the past, I would also find the way to heal the wounds I had carried for so long. The atmosphere in the shelter was heavy, almost oppressive. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the faint aroma of food coming from the kitchen created an environment that I couldn't ignore. Each step I took seemed to echo in my mind, reminding me of the fragility of the lives of the children who were there. I was there to help, but the truth was that I felt more like an intruder than a benefactor. As I walked down the hallway, the walls adorned with children's drawings contrasted sharply with the sadness I perceived in the children's eyes. The owner of the shelter, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a weary expression, greeted me with a forced smile. He led me to a room where some children were playing with worn-out toys. Among them, I recognized Lucas and Sophia, who were sitting in a corner, watching everything with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. They were taken from a situation of neglect, the man began, his voice filled with compassion. Unfortunately, it's a common story around here. But they are strong. They are adapting well. Hearing this, a wave of protectiveness surged within me. I wanted to do more for them, but what exactly could I do? That shelter seemed like a temporary solution, a stopgap for what was, in fact, a deep crisis. As we talked, the name Daniel casually slipped from the man's lips. My breath caught for a moment. Daniel. The name echoed in my mind like thunder. I hadn't expected to hear that here, especially in a place like this. Do you know someone named Daniel? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He furrowed his brow, as if trying to recall. Yes, there was a boy here named Daniel. He disappeared many years ago, a sad case. No one ever knew what happened to him. But, as I said, this happens frequently. Children disappear and are forgotten. His words cut like a knife. I remember Daniel, not just as a childhood friend but as a part of me that I had lost. The mystery of his disappearance had haunted me ever since. And now, finding a connection between him and these children left me feeling restless. He had a sister, didn't he? I asked, searching for more information. Yes, a girl named Sophia. No, wait, it was another Sophia, not the one you know. He looked down, as if searching for the right words. His sister was never found. The family never knew for sure what happened to her. My heart raced. The connection grew stronger, as if something was finally clicking into place. Lucas and Sophia. I couldn't ignore the fact that there was something deeply intertwined between those siblings and Daniel's story. It was as if the pieces of a puzzle were beginning to reveal themselves before me, but many parts were still missing. After our conversation, I returned home, my mind racing with thoughts. I couldn't let this connection slip away. Lucas and Sophia needed help, and I was determined to uncover the truth. But what exactly was I about to discover? What secrets did the past hold? That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of my childhood began to flood back in flashes, laughter alongside Daniel, playing in the park, and finally, the emptiness that followed his disappearance. I tried to distract myself, but the shadows of the past surrounded me, and I couldn't shake them off. I dreamed of Daniel. His face was clear, as if he were right there in front of me, asking for help. You need to find the truth, Amanda, he said. Don't give up. I woke up with my heart racing, filled with anguish. It was as if he were guiding me towards something much bigger than I could imagine. The next morning, I decided I needed to investigate more about Daniel's disappearance. Information was power, and the more I knew, the closer I would be to the truth. I started searching online, in old news archives and forums where people discussed cases of missing children. With each page I opened, I felt like I was digging deeper into a dark tunnel, and the anxiety grew in my chest. After a few hours of research, I found an article that mentioned Daniel's and his sister's disappearance. The words were cold and impersonal, but the pain they carried was palpable. The last time anyone saw Daniel and his sister was in a park, where they were playing. After that, they were swallowed by darkness. The connection between the siblings I had taken in and Daniel's story was undeniable. I needed to do more. If I could find Daniel's sister, perhaps I could help Lucas and Sophia. Someone needed to know what really happened. Later, as I prepared for bed, I was overtaken by a nightmare. It was a distorted representation of the event that had haunted my childhood. I was back in the park, but everything was shrouded in a dense fog. Daniel was there, but his face was a blur. He reached out to me, but when I touched his skin, I felt an intense cold, as if his life had been drained away. "Help me, Amanda," he screamed, but his voice echoed like a distant whisper. I woke up with a stifled scream, heart racing and breathing heavily. The feeling of despair consumed me. I couldn't ignore what was happening. Something deep and dark was connected to Daniel, and now, to Lucas and Sophia. They were part of a larger story, a secret that needed to be unraveled. I decided that the next day, I would confront my parents about what I knew. I needed answers. I needed to understand why the past still haunted me and how it was connected to the lives of the children who now depended on me. I didn't know what I would find, but I was willing to face the truth, no matter the cost. The revelation that awaited me could be the key to freeing not only myself but also Lucas and Sophia from the cycle of pain and abandonment that continued to repeat. The storm outside continued to roar, as if the sky were lamenting the pain and secrets it carried. I felt lost in a sea of emotions, each drop of rain echoing memories I wished to keep buried. Sitting in the living room, with Lucas and Sophia playing in the corner, I tried to focus on the present, but the past insisted on pursuing me. The image of my parents, so distant and evasive, loomed over me like a shadow. Why won't they tell me the truth? I asked myself, my heart pounding harder with each thought. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the raindrops slide down the glass like tears I couldn't shed. In the distance, thunder rumbled, and I knew I had to confront my parents. I could no longer live in ignorance. There was a thread of hope whispering to me that by uncovering the truth about them, I might better understand Lucas and Sophia's situation. When I decided to call my parents, their voices sounded so familiar yet strange, like a song you recognize but can't quite remember where you heard it. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you?" My mother's voice was sweet, but there was something different about it, a tone of worry or perhaps fear. "I'm fine, Mom. Actually, I'd like to talk about something important. Could we meet?" The hesitation in my voice didn't go unnoticed, and I realized there was an abyss between us, a growing distance that was becoming increasingly difficult to bridge. "Of course, dear. Can we meet next week? We're a bit busy right now." Her evasive tone sent a chill through me. "Next week," I repeated to myself, aware that it was more of a postponement than a real answer. I hung up the phone and leaned against the wall, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me. How could I expect them to tell me the truth if they weren't even willing to discuss the past? Lucas and Sophia were right there beside me, and their lives depended on me. What could I do to help them if I couldn't even confront my own ghosts? Sophia, with her bright and curious eyes, approached me. "Amanda, are you sad?" Her childlike voice was like a balm to my soul. I looked at her and felt guilty for not having a smile on my face. How could I be so wrapped up in my own problems when these kids were going through something much more serious? "No, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about a few things." I tried to smile, but the truth was that the emotional weight was crushing me. I wanted to be strong for them, but the fragility of my memories left me vulnerable. "If you want, I can tell you a secret," Sophia said, looking at me with a mischievous glint in her eyes. A secret? What could be so important coming from a child? "Lucas and I have a secret that our mom always talked about." "A secret?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. She nodded, pulling Lucas closer. "She always talked about a place called House of Shadows. She said it was a place where bad things happened. A place we should avoid at all costs." The mention of the House of Shadows made my heart race. It wasn't just a childhood story. It was a name I had heard whispered during my own childhood, a distant echo from a time when I didn't understand the gravity of events. "And why did your mom talk about it?" I asked, trying to contain the anxiety in my voice. "All I know is that she said we should never go there. That it was a dangerous place and many children disappeared." Sophia seemed more frightened as she spoke about it, and I wondered what kind of experience could have led her mother to give such a warning. Silence settled between us as this new information hung in the air. I couldn't help but think about the connection between Sophia and Lucas's story and my own. Daniel's disappearance, the mention of the House of Shadows. Everything was fitting together like a puzzle I had ignored for too long. Would you like to know more about the House of Shadows? I asked, looking into Lucas's and Sophia's eyes. They both nodded, and I realized that, just like me, they were ready to face whatever was hidden in the shadows of the past. With renewed determination, I began to research the House of Shadows. I went to my office and turned on the computer, typing the name in search of information. Old documents, news articles, and accounts from people who had been there appeared on the screen. The abandoned orphanage, once known for its work with children, had become a place of nightmares. The stories of disappearances and mistreatment were disturbing, and with each line I read, a growing sense of despair settled in my chest. "Did you find something, Amanda?" Lucas asked, moving closer to the screen. Sophia joined him, both with expressions of anticipation. "Yes, it seems the House of Shadows was an orphanage that closed many years ago, but the stories about what happened there still haunt the town." My voice was heavy with emotion, and I knew I had to be careful when sharing that information. It said that many children were separated from their families and never seen again. Lucas's eyes widened, and I could see the pain reflected in them. "Do you think our mom was there?" he asked, his tone filled with anguish. "I don't know, Lucas. But we need to find out. There may be a connection between your story and what happened at that place." With that, I knew my journey was just beginning. The link between the past and the present was becoming increasingly evident, and the thought of uncovering the truth about the House of Shadows gave me a new purpose. I wasn't alone in this quest. Lucas and Sophia were with me, and together, we would face whatever lay ahead. As the storm raged outside, I felt I was on the brink of unraveling a mystery that could change our lives forever. And with that determination, hope began to blossom, even surrounded by darkness. The atmosphere in the abandoned orphanage, the House of Shadows, was thick and laden with untold stories. The air was heavy with the smell of mold and despair, as if the walls themselves absorbed the tragic memories that had taken place there. Lucas and Sophia walked by my side, their wide eyes reflecting the mix of curiosity and fear that pulsed within me. Each step we took echoed in the oppressive silence, and I felt as if we were entering a labyrinth of long-buried secrets. "Is this where you found that diary?" Lucas asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. His small hand gripped mine tightly, bringing me a bit of comfort amid the uncertainty. "Yes, Lucas. This is where it all began," I replied, trying to stay calm. But the truth was that my own anxiety was rising. The idea that Daniel, my childhood friend who had disappeared, might have been here troubled me. What had he gone through? And how was this connected to the suffering of the siblings? As we explored the remnants of the orphanage, a profound sadness washed over me. Broken toys lay scattered across the floor, as if the children who had lived there had been forced to leave their childhoods behind. The light filtered through the dusty windows, casting shadows that danced on the walls, and I couldn't help but think of how many children had dreamed of a better life here, only to face abandonment and pain. "Look, Amanda!" Sophia exclaimed, pointing to a partially open door at the end of the hallway. I walked over, pulling my siblings closer to me. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a dark room filled with yellowed papers and dust-covered furniture. A central table held a stack of documents. "What is this?" Lucas asked, his eyes sparkling with the anticipation of discovering something important. "Let's see," I replied, trying to hide the apprehension growing in my chest. I approached the table and began to sift through the papers. They were records of children who had passed through here, notes made by the orphanage staff. What caught my attention most was a name that appeared on several pages: Daniel. "He was here, Lucas." "He and many other children," I murmured, feeling the weight of the words. As I read, a sense of despair began to swell within me. The records indicated that many children had been taken away, their fates uncertain. They were never found, Sophia. No one knows what happened to them. Sophia looked at me, her eyes brimming with questions. Amanda, what happened to us? What's going on here? There was a fragility in her voice that broke my heart. How could I explain what was happening when I was still trying to understand it myself? Let's keep looking. Maybe we'll find more answers. I tried to encourage them, but my voice trembled. The weight of responsibility on my shoulders grew heavier by the second. We walked deeper into the orphanage, and the dimness seemed to envelop us like a heavy cloak. Finally, we found a small room that appeared to be a living area. In the corner, there was a dusty bookshelf. As I pulled out a book, a cloud of particles danced in the air, and I sneezed. The book opened wide, and to my surprise, yellowed pages revealed a diary. Look! It's a diary! I shouted, excitement flooding through me. I began to flip through the pages and soon realized it belonged to Daniel. The handwriting was familiar, and I could almost hear his voice in every word. The pages were filled with thoughts, fears, and dreams. He wrote about a house of shadows, and how he and the other children dreamed of escaping that place. But as I continued reading, the atmosphere grew increasingly dark. Daniel mentioned experiments, something that seemed far more sinister than I could imagine. My heart raced in my chest. What had happened here? What kind of horrors had those walls witnessed? Daniel was scared, I murmured, my voice choked with emotion. He talks about things I can't understand. Terrible things. I looked at my siblings, who were now huddled close to me, their faces etched with concern. Lucas squeezed my arm, which gave me a bit more courage. He describes a dark place where the children were taken and never came back. He talks about a room, a place where no one could speak, where whispers turned into screams. The words spilled out of me like a confession. The diary was revealing not just Daniel's suffering but also a dark chapter in the orphanage's history, one I feared was tied to the fate of Lucas and Sophia. "We need to get out of here," Lucas said, his voice almost a lament. I could see the fear in his eyes, and it made me realize that curiosity came at a price. But before we could move, something made me hesitate. A passage on the last page of the diary caught my attention. "If you are reading this, know that the truth may be more painful than the lie. Beware of the shadows." A wave of cold ran down my spine, and the sensation of being watched enveloped me. I looked around, as if expecting to see something moving in the shadows. "Let's go, we need to head back," I said, pulling my siblings out of the room. As we left the house of shadows behind, the emotional pressure weighing on us became more intense. What Lucas had said earlier echoed in my mind: they had been separated from their mother, and the connection I felt between our past and the present had never been clearer. I was determined to help them, but the truth that was unfolding was heavier than I could bear. As we stepped outside, the cold air hit our faces, and the storm that had once sheltered us now seemed a metaphor for what we had discovered, a whirlwind of emotions, secrets, and a pain that needed healing. Lucas, visibly shaken, suddenly stopped. "Amanda," he began, his voice trembling, I can't take it anymore. I feel like this is all my fault. If we hadn't come here, maybe we would have never known." The desperation in his voice made me halt. "Lucas, it's not your fault. No one knew this would happen. We're in this together, and we'll face it together, okay? You and Sophia are my priority now." He nodded, but I could see the internal struggle he was facing was intense. What he had revealed about their mother and his lost memories left a knot in my throat. I needed to be strong, not just for myself, but for them. The path ahead would be difficult, but together, we had a chance to unravel the mysteries surrounding us and find light amid the darkness. I was sitting in one of the luxurious armchairs in my living room, the soft light from the lamps casting dancing shadows on the walls, but the darkness forming inside me felt much heavier. Lucas and Sophia were playing on the rug, but their innocent laughter seemed like a distant echo, unable to reach the weight of the memories that haunted me. The search for their mother had become an obsession and, at the same time, a burden I didn't know if I could bear. The rain was still falling outside, and the storm that had brought the siblings to me now felt like a symbol of the chaos that had settled into my life. The phone rang, and my heart raced. I knew that each call could bring me a new clue about their mother, but I was also afraid of what I might discover. I took a deep breath and answered. The voice on the other end was low, almost whispering. Amanda. You need to know the truth about Lucas and Sophia. My heart stopped. The person continued, their mother is your sister. She's alive. The words reverberated in my mind, as if they were an echo of a past I had tried to forget. My sister, whom I believed to be dead, was now a reality. What was I feeling? Relief, pain, confusion. My head spun as I tried to process the information. I asked what had happened, but the call was abruptly disconnected, leaving an immense void where answers should have been. I stood up, my legs trembling, and walked over to Lucas and Sophia. They were engrossed in a block game, but when they saw me, they paused. Sophia's curious gaze locked onto me, while Lucas seemed to sense that something was wrong. I told them I needed to step out for a moment to gather some important information. Lucas's look made me hesitate, but I needed to know the truth. I headed toward the house the call had mentioned, a place I vaguely remembered, a neighborhood I hadn't visited in years. The journey felt longer than usual, each traffic light a lifetime. My thoughts were in turmoil, flashes of my sister's image flickering through my mind. I remembered her laughter, the promises we made to each other as children, moments that now seemed so distant. Finally, I arrived at the house. It was small, worn down by time and neglect. I looked at the door, my heart pounding. I knocked, but there was no response. The silence was deafening. I decided to go in. The door creaked as it opened, and the smell of mold filled the air. The environment was gloomy, a reflection of the life I imagined my sister was leading. I called her name, but no one answered. I made my way to the back of the house, where I found a dark room. The afternoon light barely penetrated the dusty windows. That's when I saw her. She was sitting in a chair, her eyes lost somewhere distant. As I approached, she slowly turned, and our gazes met. The recognition was instant, but pain and confusion mixed on her face. Amanda. Her voice was a whisper but carried the weight of a scream. I didn't know what to say. The words seemed to have vanished. Instead, I embraced her, and in that moment, all the weight of my solitary life melted away. I had found her, but at the same time, I realized how much time I had lost. She told me about her years of pain and loneliness, how she had been kidnapped and kept away from us. With each word, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Lucas and Sophia were not just lost children, they were the bridge between us, the connection I never knew I needed. Her story was tragic, filled with moments I could never have imagined. But there was hope, a spark that lit up that dark place. I decided I needed to take my sister back home so she could meet the kids. The return journey felt shorter, and nervousness mixed with excitement. When we arrived, Lucas and Sophia were together, playing in the yard. When I saw them, a wave of love and protection washed over me. "Hi, kids," my sister said, her voice trembling. Lucas looked at me, then at her, trying to understand what was happening. I'm your mommy," she said, emotion spilling over. The little ones looked at her, their eyes filled with doubt, but at the same time, a spark of recognition began to flicker. The reunion was delicate. Amidst tears and smiles, the siblings approached her, and I watched the connection form before my eyes. It was as if time hadn't passed at all. My sister was back, and with her, the family I thought I had lost forever. The moment became cathartic, a release from years of pain and loss. The storm that had brought us together now felt like a symbol of rebirth. The rain had washed away not just the streets but also the wounds we carried in our hearts. I opened the door to my home, and the warm embrace of family enveloped us. From that moment on, we knew life would never be the same. The pain of the past still existed, but now there was love, hope, and a new chance. The kids ran inside, laughing and playing, while my sister and I exchanged words we had never been able to say before. Amid stories and laughter, the bond between us strengthened. The revelations of the past united us, and the light that once seemed distant now shone brightly. In that instant, I realized that true wealth was not what I had built over the years, but the relationships I had nurtured. Lucas, Sophia, and my sister were the legacy I never knew I needed, and together, we were ready to face any storm that came our way.